3 Lives 3 Worlds Lotus Steps. Wherever step goes, lotus blooms. Metamorphosis. Lotus Step Chapter 17. Book 1. Since billions of mortals in the mortal world have to enter the underworld after death, the space of the underworld is limited. In order to accommodate the ghosts who come one after another, the time of the underworld is much longer than that in the mortal world. There is no day or night in the underworld. In terms of hours alone, a cup of tea in the mortal world where the Imperial Master and the others live is equivalent to the 12 hours in the underworld. This means that even if the Third Highness and the little princess stay here for 10 days and a half, they can still return to Tsushui Garden before the rooster crows tomorrow in the mortal world. The Imperial Master breathed a sigh of relief. It should be noted that if they could not return on time and the princess was found missing all night and caused a stir, he would undoubtedly be the one who would be thrown in front of the emperor to clean up the mess. He is such an unlucky national master. An hour ago, the 3 royal highnesses brought the little princess down from the reincarnation stage, and the Mingji arranged a palace for them to rest temporarily. The little princess went to sleep, but the third prince had been playing chess with himself in the courtyard. The Imperial Master didn't think anything was wrong with Lian San, a god with such a good spirit. However, Prince Ji, a mortal, had no intention of resting after a long night of toil. He stood alone in front of the corridor and looked at the small hall where the princess rested. His back was very dark. It's desolate. After watching for a whole night, the Imperial Master probably understood why Prince Ji was so sad at his time. He only felt that the word emotion was really embarrassing. Fortunately, he became a Taoist priest at a young age. When the female official in Xuani who called herself Piao Ling came to greet her in Wanandao, the Imperial Master had just finished taking a nap. The female official announced her intention and stood quietly aside. His Royal Highness was still playing chess. After finishing the game, he stood up. Seeing the Imperial Master waiting aside, he said casually, "You come together." There are 2 rivers in the underworld. One is the river of forgetfulness, and the other is the river of remembrance. The river of forgetting is in front of the underworld, teaching ghosts to forget. The river of is deep in the underworld, and it is about remembering. According to legend, a sip of Ichuan water can make ghosts remember their past lives, and a bowl of Ichuan water can make ghosts remember their past lives. The problem is that the ghosts who have experienced the torment of Sibuquan and Wanchuan are all like a blank sheet of paper and have no idea of going to Ichuan. Therefore, for tens of thousands of years, they have basically eliminated the Lord of Hades and the immortal princesses who have served him. No one has ever set foot here. The silver light all over Mingxi illuminated the entire Changchuan River. Ichuan is said to be a river, but there is no river water flowing. The water in the river seems to be frozen. But if the water is stagnant and frozen, there is a river of purple meridian in full bloom above. The river. Lotus. Half a day of starry sky, a river of purple lotus. The blue river is like a mirror, reflecting the clear shadow of the lotus. Where the starlight and the lotus shadow meet, a mysterious hexagonal pavilion stands brightly. The female officer in Xuani stopped and only made a respectful gesture of greeting. However, no feasible path was built from the riverside to the small pavilion in the center of the river. The Imperial Master was about to ask how to cross the river when he saw that Lian San had already stepped on the purple lotus in the river. However, the purple lotus was not stepped on and was able to support His Highness firmly. The Imperial Master followed His Highness the Third Highness as he walked on these purple lotuses. He felt both luxurious and magical. He once again realized that there are indeed many differences between the mortal world and the world where gods live, and that there are indeed many differences between mortals and the gods. Different. As soon as he approached the small pavilion, he heard a slight cough coming from the pavilion, which interrupted the master's thoughts. A hoarse voice sounded. "I heard from Piao Ling that the third young master wants to get the trace of the master Abu Tua. Soul Book." Upon hearing these 5 words, Lord Abuto, the Imperial Master looked at His Highness the Third Highness in surprise. His Highness the Third Prince walked into the pavilion. The last time I saw Lord Guju was at my father's great court meeting 7,000 years ago. The person in the pavilion smiled faintly. Third young master has a good memory. The man was standing in front of a desk, and it seemed that he had been painting at his desk. The desk is also made of black crystal, but it is more transparent. There is a pot of orchids placed on the desk. He casually threw the brush into the brush washer. Actually, I have been awake for more than 500 years, but in the past few hundred years, the third young master has stopped attending Tianjuan's court meetings, so you and I have no chance to meet him. After finishing speaking, he coughed again. Among the people in the underworld who can go to the ninth heaven to participate in the court meeting, except the Lord of the Underworld, there is no other person. The Imperial Master was stunned. In the mortal world, the god who is in charge of the underworld is called the King of Hell. The statues of the King of Hell enshrined in the Temple of the King of Hell are all fierce and evil, but the handsome young man with pale skin and sickly skin in front of him is far from being evil. The national teacher is a bit confused. His Highness the Third Prince calmly said, "The great court meeting is specially opened by the Heavenly Lord to the underworld and the mortal world. I am in charge of the world and have little to do with the mortal world and the underworld. After participating in thousands of meetings, I feel that it is not necessary." The Lord of the Underworld transformed into two mysterious crystal chairs and told them to sit down. He also folded a stack of paintings at hand and transformed into a tea set on the empty table. While making tea, he said, "Among the 8 wastelands, there are only His Highness dared to ask for leave at the Great Court, and it has been hundreds of years since he did so." After brewing the tea himself, the pale lord, whose hair, crown, and clothing were all dark, spoke again. "Third young master, you have never seen Wanli clearly, so you must have guessed what I meant by inviting you here, right?" The Third Highness lowered his head and stroked the white crystal tea bowl that Lord Hades had just handed over. "Do you want to make a deal with me, Lord Guju?" The Imperial Master heard that although the Third Highness used a question, he didn't mean to question it at all. The Lord of Hades started coughing again, and after coughing for a while, he stopped, and his expression became a bit more serious. "Yes, among the gods, in terms of the vastness of friends among the demons, I can only count the 3 young masters. Enter. If the third young master can find someone from the demon clan for me, I will definitely give him Abu Tuo's soul-tracing book with both hands." His Highness the Third Highness played with the white crystal tea lid in his hand. "Who are you looking for, Mr. Guju?" The underworld lord seemed to be patient for a while before saying, "The young son of the Blue Demon Lord." "Oh, the legitimate son of the Yen family in Nanwang." His Highness the Third Prince glanced at the Imperial Master. "I remember. What is his name?" Of course, the Imperial Preceptor could not answer this question. The Imperial Preceptor didn't even know who the Blue Demon Lord was, so he looked back at His Highness the Third Prince innocently. "Yen Qiwu." The Underworld Lord answered the question on his behalf, but his expression seemed to be that he didn't want to mention the name at all. A god is looking for a demon, and the identity of this demon is quite unusual. His Highness the Third Prince smiled. "What is the reason why Mr. Guju is looking for someone?" The Underworld Lord was silent for a long time. "It's my sister who is looking for him." The National Master noticed that the Underworld Lord looked a bit gritted. His Highness the Third Prince finally put the white crystal tea cover back, picked up the teacup and took a sip. "I heard that the Queen of the Painting House accidentally saved a young man when she traveled to the southern wilderness." The Lord of the Underworld was slightly surprised. "As expected of you," he paused. "That's exactly the reason." He frowned, coughed again, and continued after calming down. "My sister is aloof and proud, and it's known all over the world, but I don't know. Why did she actually save a demon clan and accept him as her disciple? When I woke up and saw the letter she left for me while she was sleeping, I felt ridiculous. I heard that Yen Nua's little son, apart from being good-looking, has other qualities. It's useless." He frowned very tightly, and the idea of being unwilling but forced came to his mind. "I still think this is ridiculous, and I can't understand why my sister would accept such a fool as her disciple, but I have to try my best." Otherwise, I won't be able to explain it when she wakes up. His Highness the Third Prince glanced at the Imperial Master. You seem to have something to say? This kind of situation is not the occasion for the Imperial Master to speak. Lian San and Xie Guzhen basically didn't understand the conversation between the Imperial Master and the Imperial Master. However, Xie Guzhen said he didn't understand why his sister wanted to accept a fool as her disciple son. The Imperial Master does have his own opinions. The Imperial Master hesitated for a moment and said to Xie Gulu, I am thinking that since the Lord of the Underworld said that young Master Xiaoyan is good-looking, it may be because he is so good-looking that your sister made an exception and accepted him as a disciple. Then he turned to Lian San and said somewhat sarcastically, Your Highness also knows that there are many such things in this world. Gu Jujun immediately snorted and disagreed. In terms of appearance, the most beautiful woman in the world is Qingqiu Baijian, and the second most beautiful woman is Mingxi Hualu. No matter how good-looking Yan Qiwu is, she can't be more beautiful than Hualu. Myself, why does she look at Yan Qiwu differently because he is inferior to her? His Highness the Third Prince also said, on the list of beauties in the 8 wildernesses, the painting house lady is slightly inferior to Qingqiu Baijian, but I don't think Baijian is the most beautiful one. This is a matter of opinion. Hearing these words, Xie Guzhen showed a look of satisfaction on his face and did not continue to embarrass the Imperial Master. The Imperial Master shook his head in his heart, thinking, Your Highness, Lord Underworld, do you really think that the Third Highness is praising your sister in the subtext? You are too naive. The National Master felt that he was very sharp for a while, but he was also a little frustrated, because as a Taoist priest, he should not be so sharp on this kind of thing. Good Taoist priests are generally not like this. The Imperial Master was worried for a moment. It didn't take long for Lian San to say goodbye to Xie Gulwan. On the way back, the Imperial Master couldn't resist his thirst for knowledge and annoyed Lian San all the way. Along the way, the Imperial Master realized that there was something special about the siblings Xie Hualu and Xie Gulu, the Lord of the White Ming, who were in charge of the Underworld Division. These 2 siblings had never appeared at the same time since they were born. The Lord of the Underworld was sleeping, and when the Lord of the Black Underworld was in charge of the Underworld, the Lord of the White Underworld was asleep, so Xie Guzhen said that his sister left him a letter asking him to take care of Xiaoyan. At the same time, the National Master also understood why Lian San suddenly wanted to find the soul-tracing book of human ancestor Budo. It turned out that His Highness the Third Highness had already asked Princess Hong Yu about the red lotus seeds of the god Zhu Ti recorded in Nan Rant's ancient book when she came to the underworld. However, the princess recalled that the original book described the story of the god Zhu Ti after her body turned into a red lotus seed. There was no record of where they went, and the blank page they saw was also blank in the original book. As a result, the clues to find the god Zhu Ti were lost again. However, it happened that their trip was to the underworld, where the soul-tracing books of mortals were hidden, so Lian San stopped by to borrow Abuto's book from the Lord of Hades. If Abu Tua is still in reincarnation, we can find out where he is now and who he is in the soul-tracing book. Find him and fill a large bowl of each one water with him, and you will know where the red lotus seed has gone. Wherever you go, you might be able to find traces of the ancestor god. The Imperial Master had always suspected that Lian San had completely forgotten about the search for red lotus seeds. He was very relieved to hear that he had advanced the matter to this point. When Lian San was doing serious business, the Imperial Master was still willing to share his worries, so His Highness asked me to come with him to see the Lord of the Underworld, because there is something useful for me in exchange for a Budo soul tracing book. Right? The Imperial Master took the initiative and said, If your Highness has anything to do with you in this matter, just give him the instructions, and he will do anything he can. His Highness looked at him with confusion on his face. How can you help? The Imperial Preceptor was even more confused than the Third Highness. If I can't help you in any way, and your Highness is discussing this important matter with the Underworld Lord, but you still take me with you. Why is that? By the way, the Imperial Master stumbled. By the way, what does it mean? His Highness the Third Prince looked at the Imperial Master strangely, as if he didn't understand why he couldn't understand such a simple thing. With you guarding the courtyard, do you think that Prince Ji, who has such high self-esteem, will go and talk to Au? Are you clear? Do you want to apologize to her? Naturally, the Imperial Preceptor has always been a proper Imperial Preceptor, otherwise the late Emperor's dynasty would not have had the turn to devote himself to it. However, their Taoist cultivators did not care about the human heart, and the Imperial Preceptor had no attainments in understanding the human heart. The Imperial Master was very puzzled, but the princess's heart has been resolved, and the matter has been settled. Au's heart not started because of him. If he and Au haven't made it clear, it won't be settled. Otherwise, why would I ask you to bring him here? Is it fun to watch me fight? The Imperial Master still didn't quite understand, but didn't His Highness already ask the princess if she was liberated on the reincarnation stage? Although I didn't hear the princess's answer, when I left the reincarnation stage, I saw that the princess was indeed relieved. I don't quite understand why Your Highness wants Prince Ji to see the princess alone again. Isn't this an extraneous matter? Probably because he was afraid that if he didn't answer him, he would continue to ask endless questions. His Highness waited for a moment and restrained his impatience to answer the Imperial Master. Ji Mingfeng actually knew very well who should be blamed for the death of Dragonfly. Who should be blamed that day? Au, just for selfish reasons. He said lightly, Au trusts me, so when I tell her that she is not at fault, she can accept it. Ji Mingfeng, the culprit, should tell her who is really at fault, so that she can completely after this incident. Her inappropriate guilt has already penetrated deep into her bones, and it is not easy to completely eliminate them. And what I want in bringing her here is to be thorough. The Imperial Master realized this and was filled with admiration. Tonight, he guarded against fire and theft to prevent Lian San and Ji Mingfeng from fighting over Chengyu. He never thought that the account books in His Highness's mind would be like this. It made him look like a complete villain. He couldn't help but feel ashamed, Your Highness. He has a broad mind and sees things so clearly, which really puts our generation to shame. His Highness the Third nodded and accepted his compliment. The two of them walked forward without saying anything else and returned to the courtyard after half a cup of tea. In front of the moon gate entering the inner courtyard, I saw Prince Ji and the princess standing together under a wishful tree deep in the courtyard. When the Imperial Master saw His Highness stopping, he also stopped. Looking around, I could see the silver light filling the sky in this small courtyard. In the shadow cast by the tree canopy, Prince Ji and the princess stood opposite each other. Both of them were very tall, their robes dancing with the night wind. From a distance, they looked like a beautiful tree. The flowers accompany a jade tree. The princess had her back turned to them, so she probably didn't notice that they were back. Prince Ji was looking at the princess intently, and it seemed that he didn't notice them standing by the moon gate. The Imperial Master turned his ears and did not hear what the two said. He tilted his head unintentionally and was startled. The place under the third palace was as sinking as water and looked as ice-like. The Imperial Preceptor was not a fool. After thinking for a moment, he came to some understanding. He couldn't help but solemnly said, Your Highness, you said that you want them to be completely settled, and that you want the princess to completely untie her heart. The two of them are alone now, or are you going to give it to them specifically? They created the opportunity, but now you are looking at them standing together, but you are so angry. The Imperial Master spread his hands. Why are you bothering? The third prince asked him expressionlessly, Am I angry? The Imperial Master nodded. His Highness was still expressionless. Maybe it's because it's one thing when you do it, but it's another thing when you see it. The Imperial Master did not dare to answer, but looked at his words and said, Then I will go and take the princess away. After taking 2 steps, he couldn't help but turn back to advise, Why don't you put the important things first? His Highness the Third Highness had a sullen face and said nothing, but he did not object to putting the overall situation first. After a while, he rolled his sleeves and said, I'll go out and enjoy the breeze. The Imperial Master held back and reminded His Highness that the wind was quite strong here and nodded obediently. He felt that he had been so admired and ashamed just now. Chang Yu just woke up and saw that no one was in the house, so she went to the yard to look for Lian San. She walked around the yard and didn't see Lian San, but saw Prince Ji. She instinctively felt that she needed to avoid it, but as soon as she reached the wishful tree, she was stopped by Prince Ji. Prince Ji's face didn't look good. She felt that she and Prince Ji had nothing to say, so it was a bit awkward to stand there, and she didn't notice that Lian San had entered the courtyard. She didn't speak, and neither did Prince Ji. Until she became a little irritable, Prince Ji finally spoke. "I know you have been freed from the past." This was his first sentence. Chang Yu was stunned, and then she felt cold all over her body for a moment. It took her a long time to find her voice. "The prince thinks that I don't deserve to be freed, so he came to remind me again, right?" There were many emotions in her eyes, layered emotions, and those layers were extremely clear. First there was confusion, and then there was pain. "I ruined the crown prince's affairs at that time, but afterwards I didn't leave Nan Rant's ancient book." "Have you made it up to the prince? Why does the prince insist on seeing me in pain?" Ji Shitzi raised his head almost immediately. He looked at her with no color on his face. "I don't want you to suffer," he said hastily. Her reaction just now was totally unexpected by him. He thought a lot before saying that to her. He thought she might hate him or scold him. He didn't think that she didn't hate, didn't blame. She didn't even complain. She just misunderstood him. But he would rather she lose her temper with him right now, whether it's hitting him or scolding him. None of those are as heart-wrenching as this misunderstanding. He had always thought it would be good to keep her away, but now he truly discovered that nothing hurt him more than her misunderstanding. His voice was obviously hoarse. "What I said that night in the ancient tomb was not my true words, and it was not you who killed the dragonfly." He finally said what he should have said long ago: cut off the transformation. "The people on the rope bridge over the bone pool are the real culprits." Chang Yu was startled and raised his head suddenly. It was Mengjin's maid who cut down the rope bridge. He continued, "Her maid is proficient in poisonous miasma and is also very familiar with Sitan Mountain. After we arrived in Shaoxi, we asked her to guard the ancient tomb. After the ancient tomb was opened, unless the tomb intruder dies in the tomb or successfully comes out, the tomb door will not be closed. Dragonfly enters the tomb after you." After seeing Dragonfly entering the tomb, she took it upon herself to cut off the rope bridge, trying to trap you to death. In the tomb. His face was pale, and his eyes were filled with bitterness, falling on her stunned face. "General Lian is right. Dragonfly has no regrets. Her duty is to protect you. She is a shadow guard. If you are still alive, she will not. There will be no regrets." It took Chang Yu a while to react. She took a step back and supported the trunk of the wishful tree. Yes, she remembered that someone did cut down the rope bridge that night. It was because the rope bridge was cut down that Dragonfly sacrificed himself to send her to the other side. But after the incident, Ji Mingfeng told her immediately that she had killed the Dragonfly. She accepted this statement in severe pain, so she ignored that there was another culprit, the man who cut off the rope bridge and directly leading to the death of the Dragonfly. She had never thought of blaming the culprit for Dragonfly's death, as if doing so would shirk her own guilt, which would be disgraceful. Now of course she is no longer so extreme. She was silent for a long time, then knew. She wanted to ask if he knew all this from the beginning and understood the truth of this matter, why then? But for a moment she felt that it was not necessary. Because everything had passed, Dragonfly had successfully entered reincarnation, and she no longer suffered from this incident. Although she still missed Dragonfly, she felt relieved from the bottom of her heart. Ji Mingfeng seemed to have seen what she was thinking and took the initiative to answer. "I was so angry and rude that night because of my selfishness." "My selfishness is..." She didn't speak, just listened to his explanation quietly. But at this moment he couldn't say anything. What should he tell her? Tell her that all the harm he did to her came from his obsession, all from he liked her? It's just a poor excuse. The fact is that he hurt her, and he was the source of her nightmares this year. If he can't face this, how can he control his inner demons and stop hurting her in the future? So he said no more. He was silent for a long time, and after a long time he said, "There is nothing to explain. Everything is my fault." It took a lot of effort for him to look at her and ask her what he wanted to ask the most tonight. "Can you forgive me? Can we start over?" Of course, she was very surprised, as if him apologizing to her and begging her for forgiveness was even more incredible to her than when he told her who the culprit was who killed the dragonfly. He saw every subtle expression in her eyes, and every doubtful expression made his heart ache. She leaned against the trunk of the wishful tree, and finally she replied, "Actually, there is no question of forgiveness or not." She lowered her head slightly, as if thinking, "That night, the prince thought that I destroyed Nanran's ancient book and ruined the palace. I can understand that big things will blame me like that. This is not the crown prince's fault, and I have never blamed the crown prince. It's just the crown prince." She raised her head and frowned slightly. "Why do you want to start over with me?" She said in confusion, "If the prince feels guilty and wants to make amends, and also knows that I have always wanted to be friends with the prince in the past, so he mentioned that he wanted to start over, then it is not necessary." She still frowned. "I used to be ignorant, but now I understand that Prince G is not friends." It seemed that the words she wanted to use were not appropriate, so she paused and changed her words. "Prince G is not friends with you. You can make friends casually," she smiled, "and I am a useless princess. The prince doesn't need to force me. The fate between me and the prince ends in Lichuan, which is not a bad thing." He heard that she wanted to say that he would not make useless friends. Suddenly, every inch of the veins felt cold, and his fingers turned white. He waited for a while before speaking. "Who told you that I don't make useless friends, friend?" She said nothing, but smiled politely. The royal daughter's smile was a polite refusal, not wanting to answer his question. He suppressed a chill, and after a while, he whispered, "You are not a useless princess." As Lien San said on the stage of reincarnation, it is not possible for ordinary people to break through Nanran's ancient tomb and obtain Nanran's ancient books. He used to always judge her for being naive and ignorant of the world, but it was because he thought too highly of himself. After the night when he thought the ancient book was destroyed, he led the shadow guard through the ancient tomb 3 more times. The first 2 times she broke into the tomb, she was still imprisoned in the Lichuan palace. He lost 30 good generals, but he did not even walk through the huge stone corridor of the ancient tomb. Then came her departure. She left, but left 5 ancient books copied in her handwriting in the palace. Mangjin wanted to be strong. Even after getting the ancient book, she still secretly broke into the ancient tomb and vowed to compete with her. When he led the guards to rescue Mangjin from the maze of the huge stone corridor, at the last moment when she woke up, Mangjin had to admit that she had underestimated Chengyu. She was far inferior to this Central Plains person. Princess Jiao Jiao is smart and capable. Then Mangjin died in the tomb with regret and unwillingness. In fact, all of them underestimated her. This young princess from the capital has great wisdom and courage. I used that word 3 times, extraordinary. Indeed, she was the only one who got the ancient book and escaped from the destructive tomb. Only the extraordinary could do this. But at this time, she didn't seem to care about his approval. In the past, he mistakenly said that she was incompetent and weak, but she took it into her heart. Today, he said the truth, but she did not take it seriously. She stood quietly in front of him, silent for a moment, and then smiled. "I have nothing good," and the prince knew it before. Although she smiled, the smile may not be sincere, because he did not see any intimacy in her eyes, not even as good as the moonlit night when they first met. At that time, he at least saw trust in her eyes, but at this time, there was nothing in it. He had hurt her, so she would never trust him again. That smile stung him, but she continued to speak, telling him in a very formal and polite voice, "I understand everything the prince said. I have no regrets about the past at all, and I hope the prince won't either. If there is any grudge, let's not talk about it again from now on, so I will first." Then he left. If you don't believe that I really want to be friends with you, he took 2 quick steps to stop her from turning around, and raised his eyes to look at her seriously. You used to chase me, but this time, let's chase you. All the surprises just now combined were not as surprised as hers at this moment. She was stunned for a while before she remembered to speak, with confusion in her eyes. Why bother, Your Majesty? In fact, we are not even suitable to be friends. The Crown Prince cannot stay in the capital. How often, we might as well just. But he interrupted her and wanted to hold her hand. Seeing her suspicious eyes, his stiff fingers paused in his sleeves. He frowned, as if he was saying a vow, and repeated what he just said to her again very seriously. This time, let me be the one chasing after you. After they separated from Prince Ji, Qingyu was stunned for a while. The conversation with Prince Ji made her very confused, because in her heart, Prince Ji undoubtedly hated her. He was the one who was tired of her and asked her not to appear in front of him. He was the one who thought she was naive and incompetent and looked down on her, hoping that she would leave Lichuan Palace as soon as possible and stop causing him trouble. It was indeed difficult for her to understand the prince's behavior tonight. He actually said everything was his fault and wanted to be friends with her again. What she just said to Prince Ji was all true. She had indeed never hated him, because from his standpoint, she had never felt that he had done anything wrong. Of course he could be prejudiced against her, and of course he could not want to be friends with her. This friend. He also said that I find you annoying. Yes, of course he can also find her annoying. Her sadness at that time actually had nothing to do with him, it was all caused by herself, so after she understood it, she calmed down. Ji Shitzi thought about it as soon as possible, and at this time said that he hoped to start over with her, but she had actually made a choice. She and Ji Shitzi were not suitable to be friends. However, Prince Ji spoke so earnestly today and expressed his kindness to her wholeheartedly. If she refused with all her strength, it would appear to be narrow-minded. She sighed. In fact, if they weren't the kind of best friends, just casual acquaintances who could nod to each other when they met by chance, they could do it. Thinking of this, I felt relieved. As soon as she looked up and saw the Imperial Master standing beside her at some point, Chengyu turned around and forgot about her worries just now and decided to inquire with the Imperial Master about Lian San's whereabouts. The Imperial Master looked thoughtful and looked at her, hesitating to speak. Don't you quite understand how Prince Ji treats you? Chengyu looked at the Imperial Master inexplicably. Prince Ji is very guilty of me? Although I don't think it is necessary, but Prince Ji said so, and I believe him. What does the Imperial Master want to say? The Imperial Master mourned for Prince Ji in his heart. When he heard the princess address him, he immediately remembered that he was a Taoist priest. A Taoist priest really shouldn't be involved in their child-daughter affair. The Imperial Master coughed and shut up. It's nothing, he said, pointing sternly at the moon gate. The general is blowing wind outside, reminded her. After a while, the general is not in a good mood. Princess, please be careful. Qingyu didn't spend much time looking for Lian San. The palace city where the Lord of the Underworld lives in the Underworld Division is built behind the reincarnation platform. After entering the city gate, you can see several isolated islands floating in the air. The palaces are all located on the floating islands, and the floating islands are connected by covered bridges. Qingyu followed a burst of melodious music and came to a floating island covered in silver. There is a snowy scene on the island, but if you look closely, it is not a snowy scene. Because the trees all over the floating island have silver branches and leaves, and the paths in the forest are all made of white rocks, it looks like it has just snowed heavily. Qingyu followed the music and walked into the white leaf forest in front of him. After taking a few steps, his eyes suddenly opened up. In a spring pool surrounded by white leaves, several dancers in red are standing on the water and dancing. At the moment when the dancers dispersed from an array of petals, Chengyu saw Lian Song, who had just been blocked by the dancers. He was sitting on a white jade bench and drinking from a wine bottle. A dancer's white sleeves were thrown affectionately towards Lian San, and the thin silk yarn brushed from his left hand holding his cheek. brushed the back of his hand, and brushed half of his face. Qingyu is a person who has seen the world, and she remembers that the dancers in Linling Pavilion also have the skill. When girls do this, their soft figures, charming faces, and the charming fragrance of flowers hidden in their sleeves will sometimes make her feel dizzy. Lian San raised his eyes slightly, and the dancer twisted her waist and leaned into his arms. But at that moment, the pure white sleeves thrown by the dancer suddenly turned into thousands of fragments, and then turned into a curtain of snowflakes, fluttering and falling from the midair. The third prince leaned back and gave her a cold look. The dancing girl was frightened by Lian San's cold eyes and stood in front of him. Another clever dancing girl turned around into the falling snowflakes and gently pulled the sleeve-throwing dancer. If you haven't entered the queue yet, don't ruin the fun of the third young master who has been defeated in this dance. The dancers danced in a row again, and the snowflakes also fell at this time. After the falling snowflakes, Chengyu discovered that Lian San had seen her at some point, and his eyes fell on her across the entire spring pool. She didn't know what was in those eyes, but when they focused on her face, it made her feel heavy. Changyu remembered that the Imperial Master said that Lian San might not be in a good mood, so it seemed that he was indeed in a bad mood. When she walked around the spring pool and approached, he had withdrawn his gaze and started drinking by himself again. Whether he was angry or in a bad mood, she was never afraid anyway, so she found a seat beside his bench, wiped it with her sleeve casually, sat down, and talked to him nonchalantly. The Imperial Master said, "Brother Lian San, you were blowing the wind outside the yard, but why did it come here, making it easier for me to find it?" He glanced at her lightly. "What are you doing here?" The dancers on the spring pool finished their dance. A particularly good-looking dancer brought new fruits, wine, and food from the hands of a waiting maid in the distance. Qingyu picked the fruits from the lacquer plate and said, "Here, take you back." "What are you doing back?" This was not a question that she could ask her brother Lian San, who was originally Jianji Jianweizhua. Chengyu looked up at him while carrying a bunch of grapes and said somewhat suspiciously, "Just take a rest and then return to the mortal world." Lian San drank and said nothing. She thought he was a little strange, so she took a closer look at his face, but apart from that face being particularly beautiful, she couldn't see anything else. She thought about it and asked again, "You don't want to go back yet? Rest." He did not answer her immediately. The dancer in red holding the lacquer plate smiled slightly at this moment. The young lady's concern for the third young master is touching, but how do the young lady know that the third young master is not resting here? She was a little confused. The sound of sand is like aged fruit wine, with a ripe and pleasant sound. Qingyu realized that this was the clever dancer who had just rescued the sleeve-throwing dancer. The dancing girl slightly arched her eyebrows and said, "To be honest, young lady, it's rare for the third young master to come to the underworld. In fact, each of our sisters has prepared a special dance to show to the third young master. But if the young lady is right now, if you take the third young master away, all our wishes will come true." These words were actually a bit excessive, but when said by the dancer in front of me, they were not annoying. Changyu held his cheek and waited for her words, and saw that she pursed her lips, and the pear dimples on her lips were also very cute. "Today, my lord set up this dance banquet for the third young master. Although it is a small banquet, but according to the rules of the Ming division, if the lady wants to take the third young master away early, she needs to compete with me. How about we compete with our dancing skills this time? The lady will compete with me, and we will be safe. I would like to dance to the third young master, and if the young lady's dancing skills are better than mine, she will definitely be able to please the third young master more, and the third young master will probably be more willing to go back with the young lady. What do you think, young lady?" Obviously the person who can make the most decisions here is Lian San, but the dancer in red came to ask her because she was sure that Lian San would have no objection. Even in the few words he had just said to him, he really didn't seem to have any intention of leaving the meeting midway. While peeling the grapes, Chengyu felt that the dancer was really smart, but the problem was that she couldn't dance at all, and she would definitely lose in this competition. But fortunately, She was a princess who often visited brothels, so she didn't think it was a big deal to lose to other girls in this kind of thing. There are so many girls who want to dance for Lian San. This is great. She wants to see it too. This is a great suggestion. Let's do it. She put down the grapes in her hand and said happily to the red dancer. His Highness the Third Highness lost his grip on the wine bottle and fell to the ground. The music sounded, and the dancers performed dances on the spring pool one by one. As expected, each has its own merits. Although Chenyu can't dance himself, he has seen many dances. She has watched the sacrificial dance performed by the clan in the outskirts. She has watched the Daka dance performed at the palace banquet. She has also appreciated the Hu dance performed by the barbarians as tribute. In addition, she also visits brothels when she has nothing to do, and she also enjoys the folk music and dance. It's menurching. Although she was so well informed, she was also stunned by the dancing of the Mingji tonight. The figure is really not moving, the charm has been revealed, and these Mingji, their figures are really soft. Changyu was fascinated by the scene and even commented on the highlights. Look at the cloud steps, they are really walking like soaring clouds. It is so light and graceful. This flying swallow jumps, the legs are so straight. Did you see that lower waist just now, Brother Lian San? Like that, how can the waist be so soft? She ate grapes and watched the dance, looking calm and confident. She frowned 3 times and asked her a question. Have you finally learned how to dance? Are you confident enough to compete with them? No. Lian San put down the wine bottle. So you wanted to see them dance, so you agreed to them, right? She was unprepared. Yes. After she finished speaking, her heart skipped a beat. The third His Highness looked at her, actually laughed, looked at her for a while, and said, I agreed to them so readily because I didn't want to compete with them or win me back, right? Changyu thought, it's broken. She sat on the edge of the bench and felt her head was heavy. She thought for a long time and said, that's because you don't seem to want to go back. His Highness the Third Highness did not let her fool her and said calmly, tell the truth. She sighed, She put her hands into a spire and put it under her chin, She said, again, and finally chose to give up under Lian San's cold eyes. Everyone has a love for beauty. She broke the rules and said, if the pretty girls want to dance for you, of course you should let them do it, because then they will dance happily, I will also be happy watching, and everyone will be happy. Then I saw that they had finished dancing, so I gave up and went back. There was nothing wrong with that, because I couldn't dance. Besides, what they said was very reasonable. Even third brother, you can rest here, and you don't have to go back, so what are you angry about? After thinking about it, she felt that these words were very logical. The veins on His Highness's forehead twitched. I'm not angry. Okay, she muttered, then you're not angry. She ate a grape and picked another one for Lian San, trying to lighten the mood. Then you eat grapes? I won't eat. He raised his fan and pushed her hand away. She didn't feel embarrassed and just ate it by herself. Changyu actually has experience in how to coax Lian San when he is angry, but she was very sad and happy tonight, and her mood was not stable. She was afraid that she would not perform well, and would not only be unable to coax him back, but would also be self-defeating, so she thought about maybe letting Lian San go. If you let it go for a while, he might be able to recover. She planned to let the Third Highness go, but the Third Highness had no intention of letting her go. He raised his eyebrows and asked her, if you let me rest here alone, you won't worry about what will happen later, right? She really wasn't worried about this, so she couldn't help but ask, these dancer sisters, they are all girls who are powerless. The beasts of the underworld are not even afraid of you, the third brother. What can the girls do to you? Yes or no? The music suddenly became louder, and the dancer in the spring pool jumped up. Her red gauze skirt spread out in the air. Qingyu's attention was immediately attracted, but since Lian San was looking at her expressionlessly at this time, her eyes only slipped away and then quickly moved back. His Highness the Third Highness looked at her coldly. Chang Yu thought that he might not be able to help but want to hit her, so out of instinct, he hid towards the corner of the bench. Seeing her action, His Highness the Third Prince rubbed his forehead and said to the spring pool, "Stop." The music beside the spring pool suddenly stopped, and the dancer in the middle of the spring pool also quickly stopped her movements and almost fell into the water. Chang Yu looked at Lian San in confusion. But he seemed too lazy to pay attention to her and just whispered to the dancers in the spring pool, "Change the comparison." He raised the folding fan, and several books appeared floating in the air. "Dance makes me dazzled. You guys are the same." She competes to memorize this, and whoever can memorize the entire scripture in the shortest time wins. Qingyu was stunned. Among the several scriptures floating in the air, she was particularly familiar with the 5 large characters on the cover, the Lotus Sutra of Wonderful Dharma. She had copied this scripture for the Empress Dowager. There were more than 78,000 words in the book, which was a lot of words. She has a photographic memory, and she has a great chance of winning compared to memorizing this. Even if she doesn't read the long scripture, the more than 78,000 words are already in her mind. But why did Lian San let them compete like this? She was in a daze, seeing Lian San hooking his fingers at her. She leaned over in response and heard him vindicatively threaten in her ear, "If you still can't win this, and you dare to throw me here, then this dance party after that, I will throw you in the underworld. Do you understand?" He asked her gently. Although she has a great chance of winning in this comparison, if there is any fairy here who devotes herself to Buddhism, she can also memorize this long sutra. She shuddered. She licked her lips. "Are you serious?" His Highness the Third Prince slowly put his fan on her shoulder and patted her gently. He smiled in her ear. "Guess." The Imperial Master waited in the small courtyard for a long time, but did not wait for Chang Yu to bring back Lian San, who was blowing the wind. He was worried and went out to search. The Imperial Master was not lucky enough to find the floating island, so it took him a long time to find it. After passing through the white leaf forest, I really saw His Highness the Third Prince and the little princess, who were sitting on a bench talking about something. But it was not the two of them who caught the Imperial Master's attention, but the several girls in red in the spring in front of them. The girls were all dressed as dancing girls, sitting in the spring pool holding a copy of the Lotus Sutra and reciting it solemnly. At that time, the Tathagata released the light from his eyebrows and illuminated the 80,000 Buddha lands in the east. In the chanting of the sutra, the national teacher was a little confused. He thought, how could the bald donkeys move so fast and spread the sutra to the underworld? The Imperial Master was confused for a while. After he regained consciousness, he took out a booklet from his chest, quietly approached the group of dancing girls, and patted the shoulder of the dancing girl sitting at the outermost. "Girl, we Taoist, are you interested in learning more about the Taiping Jing?" "Girl." Chang Yu finally proved herself and did not give Lian San the chance to leave her in the underworld. In fact, she only memorized the first 3,000 words, and the dancers below all surrendered. No one had the temperament to insist on competing with her. Chang Yu had already seen through it and understood that this was because no one wanted to endorse her, and they all hoped to lose to her early in order to end this torture as soon as possible. At the same time, she felt that if she came to Mingxi 3 times in a row, she would no longer be treated like a dozen dancers begging to dance to him, so it would be a good idea if they didn't offer him knives. When Lian San won back and took him away from the spring pool, Chang Yu was still wondering why Lian San insisted on her winning him back. What was he thinking, and what was wrong with him? So he didn't realize that Lian San was drunk. She later heard that the Lord of the Underworld, Xia Guju, loved wine and had a lot of fine wines stored in the cellar. Some wines were mild in taste but extremely strong in nature, and the wines he drank 3 times that night were of this type. Of excellence. At first, neither she nor the Imperial Master noticed that Lian San was drunk. After all, His Highness looked normal from head to toe. Until you walk down the covered bridge. After getting off the covered bridge, they were supposed to go east, but Lian San chose the opposite direction without hesitation. The Imperial Preceptor was confused at the back. "Where are you going, General?" Lian San froze. Back to the palace. The Imperial Preceptor raised his finger and pointed to the small flower forest in the east. Over there is the Return Palace. General. Qinyu was indeed surprised that Lian San could remember the wrong way, because there was a small flower forest in front of their palace, and as long as you were not blind, you would not go wrong. But she just thought that maybe Lian San had an accident and didn't pay attention to his steps. But after turning around the little flower forest, Lian San went astray again. The Imperial Preceptor calmly reminded from behind, "General, we have to turn to the left." Changyu was a little suspicious at this time. After finally entering the palace gate, she stopped for a long time in front of the moon gate in front of the small courtyard. The Imperial Master also stood there with a low eyebrow for a long time. But she couldn't hold it back and asked boldly, "Brother Lensan, can't you remember which direction your room is?" Lian San's expression froze again. The Imperial Master was much smarter than her. Upon seeing this, he immediately walked to the front, leading the way while scolding her. "How can the general not remember which palace he lives in? Princess, your mind is full of fantastic ideas." Lian San glanced at the Imperial Master first, and then gave her a cold look. Without saying anything, he took the steps and followed the Imperial Master towards the main hall. Go. Chengyu was sure that Lian San was really drunk. She had been drunk before, and it must have been uncomfortable to be drunk enough to make a mark. Although Lian San didn't have any other reaction, how could he know that he was not suppressing it? It's not good to have no one to take care of you in this situation. She quickly chased after him. She thought about it. Even if Lian San tried to save face in front of the Imperial Master, what would it matter to her? She insisted on following the palace to take care of her, and Lian San would not chase her away. She was very good at making wishful thinking, and she did understand Lian San, but she almost followed him, but Prince Ji came out halfway and tried his best to stop him. Ji Shixi strongly objected to her wanting to go to Lian Sanfeng's home to take care of her closely. Ji Shixi's theory is that she is a girl who has not left the court. Even if her original intention is just to take care of a drunk person, it is very inappropriate to stay alone in a man's room late at night. However, Prince Ji was also a considerate prince, and he did not just object. He also put forward feasible suggestions. Fortunately, in addition to her, there were two people here, the Imperial Master and him, who could also take care of her on her behalf. In a row, it would be more appropriate to resolve this matter this way. How did Ren Qingyu explain to him that she and Lian San were sworn brothers and sisters, so there was no so-called distinction and care between men and women? Prince Ji also stopped in front of the palace gate and refused to let go. The Imperial Master stood aside and looked at His Highness, whose expression had become even worse since Prince Ji showed up. Every time the princess said that she and His Highness were just brothers and sisters, His Highness' expression became even colder. The Imperial Master was tired and felt that he was completely unable to cope with such a sure field. He couldn't help but try to survive in the cracks and put forward another suggestion. Since the princess and the crown prince are equally caring about the general, why not be as good as the princess? We go in with the crown prince to take care of the general. The crown prince doesn't have to worry about the princess' reputation being damaged, and the princess doesn't have to worry about us two grown men taking care of the general inappropriately. It's really the best of both worlds. Shut up. His Highness finally had enough and rubbed his forehead with an extremely impatient expression. Everyone, get out. After saying that, he closed the door with a bang. The Imperial Preceptor looked at Chengyu, and Chengyu also looked at the Imperial Preceptor. The two looked at each other for a while, and then Chengyu turned to complain to Prince Ji, who was still standing in front of the palace door. "It's all you," she said sullenly. "Drink it's hard to be drunk and have no one to take care of you." Prince Ji slowed down his voice at this time and made a concession gesture. "Well, it's all my fault." He looked at her and whispered, "But the general looks very sober. I think he can take care of himself." The princess was worried. "You have no idea that Brother Lian San must be just trying to be brave." Prince Ji didn't say anything more, but his brows furrowed tightly. The Imperial Master looked at their current situation and sighed deeply. His Highness was lying on the bed thinking about something. There is no day or night in the underworld, so he doesn't actually need to rest. He was indeed drunk, but his mind was clear. He thought of Tangqi, whom he had not thought of for a long time. Why do you think of Tangqi at this time? He frowned and looked at the tense ceiling, thinking that maybe all his knowledge and understanding of the word love came from her. Tangqi can become an immortal, and he is indispensable. The Third Highness met Tangqi for the first time when she appeared in his room late at night after Qingluojun's banquet in Nanwang. She did not hesitate to recommend herself as a pillow, just to ask him for Baizé. The second time I saw her was not too long ago. It was in the northern wilderness where he was pacifying chaos. She rescued several of his soldiers and asked him for the way to become an immortal. These two requests were all for her young brother, who depended on her for life. Her young brother was injured by the two-winged tiger in the Seven Nether Cave in the southern wilderness. He needed to use Baizé as a pledge, supplemented by the western velvet grass growing on the seashore of 36 Heavens, the holy land of the gods, and refined it with Laojuan's Bagua furnace. Take 1 pill a day for 300 years to recover. Bays, western velvet grass, and Bagua furnace are all belonging to the gods. If she becomes an immortal, these 3 treasures will be at her fingertips. It is for this reason that she has such transcendent requirements. And why did he help her become an immortal at that time? He frowned and thought back. Oh, it seems that it would be interesting if a red lotus plant that was despised by the entire southern wilderness demon clan and could not bloom at all could become an immortal. After that, he spent a lot of energy to use the fairy's whiteness to transform the demon's crimson in her body, and helped her escape from the thunderstorm, and finally allowed her to ascend. He also fought with Emperor Donghua, who was in charge of the Immortal Book. He greeted her and secured her the position of Flower Master, allowing her to rule the Yaoqi. However, even though he had helped her so much, he had never really paid attention to her at that time and before that. She was indeed quite interesting, different from the many women from the gods and demons he had seen, but that was all. He really noticed her after she fell in love with Shangji. There are many rules in the 9 heavens. One of them is that the spiritual beings who were not born as immortals but were cultivated as immortals by other clans. After attaining the immortal position, they must abstain from the 7 emotions and eliminate the 6 desires. Otherwise, they will be stripped of their immortal status and imprisoned. Reincarnation. Therefore, even if she fell in love with Shangji, she did not dare to admit it frankly and could only watch his second brother silently from the side. When she first fell in love with his second brother, he knew it. She secretly watched him for hundreds of years, and he also watched them for hundreds of years. Everything in the world is impermanent. Impermanence is the flow of life and death. In more than 40,000 years of life and death, he has never seen anything lasting or lasting. He only feels that everything in the world is empty and desolate. His heart was also desolate. But a little flower demon with no attainments in Buddhism or Taoism has silently preserved the most volatile and infatuated love for hundreds of years, and has a certain attitude of never wavering until death. Not that it didn't surprise him. Even though he was called romantic by all the people in the world, he actually never knew what love was. Sometimes Tangqi is timid, but sometimes she is surprisingly bold. She clearly knows that this topic is taboo for immortals like her, but when the new little flower fairies discuss this topic in private, she dares to a lofty talk. When love sprouts, it may just be a good feeling. When the roots of love grow, jealousy arises. When the leaves of love grow lushly along the roots, possessiveness arises. And when the leaves of love are spread all over, the vines of love have spread over the whole sea of the heart, and they cannot be cut away. The little flower fairies became excited after hearing this, and they all urged, "So what then?" So what? At that time, it was too late to regret it, and I had no idea anymore. As long as he is good, I can do anything. Although he heard those words inadvertently that day, he didn't feel anything at all at the time. He only found her metaphor a bit novel, so he remembered it. But today, those words reappeared in his mind again, but it was as if every word and every sentence was said just for him. When the roots of love grew, jealousy arose. When the leaves of love grow lushly along the roots of love, they become possessive again. Jealousy. Possessive. His jealousy towards Ji Mingfeng. His possessiveness towards Cheng Yu. This is love. This is actually love. It's not just love and appreciation. It's not just seeking one night's happiness. It's not that having her by your side is everything. This is love, born from the bottom of his heart. Although it often made him angry, it never made him feel desolate. After coming to this conclusion, His Highness was stunned for a long time. He was unable to recover for a while. But in this daze, he heard the window snap. Someone jumped in. Cheng Yu was very lucky that Lian San forgot to lock the window tonight. She originally planned to wait until Prince Ji and the Imperial Master had gone back to their rooms to rest, and then she would quietly run over to take care of Lian San. She knew very well what it was like to be drunk, and she was really worried. But Prince Ji seemed to have guessed her thoughts and kept guarding her door to prevent her from going out. She was able to defeat Prince Ji, but could not beat him, so she had no choice but to ask Ming Ji to bring water for bathing and plan to stop there. However, when she went out after taking a bath, Prince Ji was gone. She quickly seized this opportunity, and without even having time to change her clothes, she slipped along the wall and slipped under Lian San's window. She pushed the window open and rolled lightly into the room. The room was dark. Cheng Yu tentatively called Brother Lan San, but no one answered. Since there is no sun or moon in Hades, the external lighting depends entirely on the starlight that permeates the sky. However, since the starlight cannot enter the room, the lighting inside the room relies on bright pearls. She arrived in a hurry and forgot to bring a bright pearl to explore the way. At this time, she could only open the window wider and rely on the faint light of the stars outside to identify where the bed was. "Brother Lan San, are you asleep?" she asked softly in the direction of the jade bed. No one answered. She knew that Lian San was alert, but it was like this now, which made her a little panicked. She hurried to the jade bed to see how he was doing. However, the jade bed was placed deep in the room, and the faint light of the stars could not reach it. In the darkness, she could not tell what happened to Lian San. She was worried for a moment, then simply kicked off her shoes and climbed onto the bed, reaching out to Lian San's forehead to see if he was sweating. She put her right hand on his forehead and explored it. He didn't sweat, but his forehead was a little cold. Coldness on the forehead is a symptom of exogenous dampness. However, when Li Xiang took care of the drunken Zhu Jin, he also shared his experience with her, saying that some people drink too much alcohol and their whole body will feel cold after being drunk, which is called jiuhan. At this time, they need to drink some ginger tea to keep warm. She couldn't tell whether Lian San was suffering from external dampness or cold due to alcoholism. She couldn't tell just by looking at his forehead, so she reached out and touched his face. She felt that his cheeks were as cold as his forehead, and she moved her fingers along the way. It reached his neck. Just as she was trying to reach for the pulse point at his collar, her wrist was suddenly held. The world was spinning for a while, and when she came to her senses, she realized that Lian San had woken up at some point and was holding her right hand and pressing her down. In this dark corner of the bed, even though the two of them were so close, she couldn't see the expression on Lian San's face. She could only feel the cool touch on the wrist of his right hand, which was imprisoned by him, and the oppression caused by his tall body. The feeling and the warm breath of his slowly approaching. He smelled of alcohol, but it was not strong. Instead, the fragrance of baiqinan between his sleeves suddenly became strong at this moment, lingering on the tip of her nose, making her dizzy. Although she didn't realize what the situation was, she instinctively wanted to speak, but his free hand suddenly touched her throat, and his slightly cold fingers lightly touched her throat. She didn't know whether she was too surprised or too nervous, and suddenly she couldn't speak. She stared at him blankly, but due to the dim light, she could not see anything clearly. Lian San was actually awake the entire time. The place where the jade bed was indeed dark, but Zi Qingyu jumped in through the window, and he saw her every move very clearly. He heard her soft test, but he didn't respond, just stared at her standing in front of the window quietly. She must have taken a bath and was wearing a plain silk butterfly and floral pajamas. Her long hair, which was tied into a bun during the day, was spread out and hung down like a piece of satin, dark and moist. He never knew her hair was that long. Her long hair rested on top of her pajamas, which was a long silk skirt tied with buttons. There were 12 buttons tied from the neckline to the corners of the skirt. The neckline was opened a little low, revealing a pair of delicate collarbones. The long black hair, the slightly frowned eyebrows, the snow-white pajamas, and the flowers and butterflies woven with silver threads are about to fly. He looked at her in the darkness and couldn't look away. He knew this was not the right time to see her. He shouldn't have seen her either the moment before he discovered what he really felt about her, or now. There were some things he needed to think about, but he hadn't thought them through yet. She appeared in this dark room like this, and he couldn't think anymore if she stayed there for a moment longer. He knew why she came. He thought she would go back after he pretended to be asleep. When he saw her hurriedly coming to his bed, taking off her shoes and climbing onto his bed without any hesitation, for a moment, he didn't know what night it was. When she climbed onto his bed barefoot, her white skirt was pulled up a little, revealing an increasingly wider calf. Because of its freshness, the whiteness was more delicate, which made his eyes start to hurt. He had never cared so much about a woman's body and had such fond thoughts. He thought that he was really drunk and could no longer look at her, so he closed his eyes. But the perception is more sensitive. He felt her move closer to him. Her whole body seemed to be filled with moist vapor. When she came closer, it was like a warm mist approaching his body. The clear and soft water mist seems to be turning into rain in the next moment, and when it turns into rain, it is not difficult to imagine that it will be pure, filament-like rain and dew, falling on everything and anything in this world. Above, they will be extremely quiet and gentle. As if to confirm his imagination, her fingers touched his forehead. His eyes shot open. The finger felt nothing and moved to his cheek again. A feather-like touch as if afraid of waking him up. Ruthless, somewhat sentimental. He knew that all her actions had pure meanings, and she was just worried about him getting drunk. But at this time, this simplicity for him had turned into an irresistible temptation. Emotionally, she is as pure as a piece of white paper, but she also has the innate ability to confuse him. He used to be angry at her contradictions, but now, he was just uncontrollably bewitched and attracted. Almost out of a predator's instinct, he couldn't help but pin her down. She cannot be allowed to speak. He knew her too well. Once she spoke, it would be words he didn't like. So his fingers moved to her throat and gave that place a very slight touch. In the darkness, her almond-shaped eyes showed surprise. She was always clumsy at times like this, and she must have thought it was her own fault that made her unable to speak, so a trace of confusion soon appeared in her eyes. Surprised, confused. That made her appear vulnerable. Normally, they would have moments like this when they were very close, but she was either naive or unreasonable, which always made him angry immediately. He would rather she be more vulnerable at times like this. The black silk stockings were spread on his bed, and Hua Beatty's pajamas wrapped around her body. It was a body that only a delicate woman would have, slender but plump. He let go of her wrist, but she didn't move. His left hand paused briefly in her sleeve, and then touched her forearm. She stiffened. The pajamas wrapped her body exquisitely, but the sleeves were wide. His fingers traced her forearm without any hindrance, her slightly bent elbow, then her upper arm, and then her shoulders, her butterfly bones. The body that had just been bathed was as soft and warm as gel, with a slight moist smell of water mist. His free hand was kneaded into her black hair, and the blue hair wrapped around his white fingers with clear joints, giving her a lingering feeling for no reason. He deliberately ignored her eyes that suddenly became foggy, and only saw a little cinnabar between her eyebrows, which was extremely red at this time. He leaned down and placed his lips on her forehead. She shuddered. Just like a string that has only been plucked for one syllable, the slight trembling has a weak and moving quality. This slight tremor attracted him to continue to be wanton on her face. He kissed her eyebrows softly, then moved to her eyes and the bridge of her nose. His palms were tightly attached to her small and smooth butterfly bones, caressing and kneading them. His intention was to comfort her, but instead there is an irrepressible hint of erotic indulgence. He couldn't help but exert force on her, whether it was kissing or touching her, and just when his lips tried to approach hers, he felt the slight trembling become violent, and her shoulders, her whole body, it became stiffer little by little under him. He paused with a slight gasp. Then he also heard her breathing, low and gentle. He leaned close to her ear and comforted her in a mute voice. "Don't be afraid." But the comfort had no effect, and she trembled even more. He then left her a little. At this moment, he finally saw her eyes clearly again. The misty eyes were no longer surprised or confused, but filled with fear. He froze as if a basin of ice water was poured down on his head. After a moment, he finally woke up and understood what he was doing. When he unlocked her band voice, he heard her trying to wake him up timidly and desperately like a bullied little beast. "Brother Lian-san, have you mistakenly recognized the person? I am Ayu." This was her excuse for him. He let her go. Before the familiar irritation filled his heart, what first surged into his heart was an endless feeling of desolation. His loss of control, his gentleness, and his inability to control all seemed to her like harm and only brought her fear. She never understood anything. After a long time, he was able to respond to her. "Ayu." His voice was emotionless. She was frightened, and she lay on the bed panting and trying to calm herself down. When she heard him call her name, she finally breathed a sigh of relief. "Well, I'm Ayu," she said with lingering fear, paused, and immediately added in a low voice, "I know that Brother Lian-san has mistakenly admitted the wrong person, and I won't blame you." He was really fed up with her self-righteousness at this time, but the words "I did not admit the wrong person" were stuck in his throat and could not be uttered. What happens if you say it? What will happen to her? What should he do? He prided himself on being smart, but for a moment he didn't know how to solve this problem. So after a long silence, he just said calmly, "Ji Mingfeng is right. Don't go to a man's room late at night in the future. It's very dangerous." She had completely calmed down, sat next to him, and explained to him with a frown, "I have never been to other men's rooms late at night, and I will never go there. I did it because I wanted to take care of Brother Lian-san." He looked at the stars flying outside the window and interrupted her. "I am also in danger, do you understand?" Her frown deepened. "I don't understand." She looked at him, her eyes full of trust. "Brother Lian-san will not hurt me. Brother Lian-san is the only person in this world who will never hurt me." He finally looked back at her. She interrupted him firmly. "That's because you recognized the wrong person. You just didn't know it was me." There were rare moments of conflict in his life, but she always made him feel conflicted. For example, just now, he didn't know whether to let her go or let her stay. And now, like this, he didn't know whether to be grateful for her trust or to should be tired of her trusting him so much at a time like this. He could only order her coldly, "In the future, even in my room, you are not allowed to come in easily." She immediately sat up straight and asked him, "Why?" He had known she would react this way. She always did. It was actually very easy to shut her up, and there was no need to really reason with her. He always knew how to deal with her. "There's no reason, it's not allowed," he said. She lowered her head in frustration and gave in as expected. "Well, fine, if you don't allow it, then don't allow it." Then, he ordered her to be kicked out before she made a new request. "You can go back." She hesitated for a while before getting out of bed, shuffling her shoes to the window, and then turned back to ask him worriedly, "Brother Lian-san, are you okay? Do you really not need to drink a bowl of ginger tea?" "No need." This time he didn't look at her. It wasn't until he heard her jumping out of the window that he moved his gaze to the window again. As she left, the shining stars seemed to dim a lot, like resting fireflies, their light dimmed due to sleepiness. The room was extremely quiet for a moment. Everything just now was like a dream. A sweet dream. And when she left, he was finally able to continue thinking. He didn't know what it was, why it came into existence, or why it came into existence between him and Chengyu. He could only decide that if this was love, then it was wrong from the beginning. The fault in this matter is not with Chengyu. The fault is not with her wholeheartedly treating him as her brother, and the fault is not with her innocence and slowness. It's his fault. From the moment he fell in love with her, everything was wrong. He was a god, and having feelings for a mortal would do neither her nor him any good. He should have realized this before she jumped through the window. He was negligent at that time. At this moment, he finally remembered that this was the most important thing. He suddenly recalled what she had said jokingly to him when he was in Sushui Garden tonight. Does it mean that today, if the imperial grandmother offers you another marriage, will you, brother Lian-san, change your mind about marrying me? He was stunned at that time because he had never thought about marrying a concubine. As a Protoss, he is not yet old enough to consider marrying a concubine. But at this time, when he faced the word, marrying a concubine, for the first time, he only felt upset and disappointed. Even if he fell in love with Chengyu, it was best to stop it here. Because he cannot marry a mortal. Although he was always annoyed by her naivety and slowness, occasionally when he was angry, he even wanted to ask her if she had been made stupid by Zhu Hibiscus. But at this time, she had to admit that it was great that Zhu Jin had brought her up like this. She had never made a move on him. It was great. This was a good thing, both for him and for herself. End of Lotus Step Book 1. By Tangqi English translated using Google.